it might seem silly, but like it's become a bit of a team ritual for us where everyone like, at least I look forward to seeing what the image is for our Hoopy Numbers presentation every week. It just adds a little bit of delight. Hi everyone, I'm Stella Garber from Hoop and I'm here with my co-founder Brian, and today we are going to walk through a few of his favorite AI workflows, because what I hear from so many people is that they want to use AI and agents and all the things in their workflow, but they don't know how to get started. So Brian's going to walk us through three of his favorite, or not, maybe not favorite, but like daily things that he does.
I mean, they're kind of favorite. I don't know. I think AI is one of those things where we're all looking, it's very impressive, but like after that first moment of it being very impressive, you're trying to find utility. So it's like, okay, this is cool that I can, make a poem that uses the first letter of the alphabet or whatever, but how do I actually do something that's, going to save me some time during the day, or take a task that is otherwise manual and make it automatic, or to give you a new capability. So the things that I'm going to talk about today kind of touch on those. Some of them are smaller. Some of them are, for me, opened up a whole new capability that I didn't really have. So I'm excited to get into it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so let's start with a small one that actually saves me time every single day. So as a small startup, one of our values, one of the things we care deeply about, is being really responsive to customers. I think anytime someone takes the time to write into you and ask a question about your product, like that's a great opportunity to create a bit of a relationship and to just create an affectation around your brand that like we care about customers. We're trying to provide value. Like every company that provides anything should probably invest in good customer service. So to that end, we have a support rotation. We try and get right back to customers pretty much as soon as we can see whatever the message is. And so one of the things that we do around that is, I'm going to share my screen, is we have a pretty simple support rotation. So this is our Hoop team calendar.
So before you get too into it, when you're talking about support, it's like people who are pinging us we have a little chat widget on our website and in our app. So it's like people in real time who are pinging us and asking us questions and or emailing us. So
right, totally. People who are emailing us, or primarily people who are in the product sending us a message. So the way that we handle that is that we have a support rotation every day. So you can see this calendar entry. It says support and it says Brian and Ben. So what that means is the first person is the person who's responding to tickets right away, and then the second person is an engineer, and the engineer is responsible for any technical escalations that we may have. So the thing that we wanted to do here is every morning I would go into the support channel and say, hey, today it's going to be Brian on primary and Ben on secondary on tech escalation. And then tomorrow, just FYI, it's going to be Justin on primary and Brad on secondary. So I would go into Slack, I would check the calendar, and every day I would write that message, and fine, like that's, a few minutes every day, and set the schedule. But that's the kind of thing, normally you could automate that with Zapier and a few other things. You would have to format your calendar entry a certain way and do a couple of technical steps. And it's just a bit of hassle for saving a few minutes every morning. And at least in my calculation, not worth it. But with AI, it's a lot easier to set that up. And so I'll show you what I did and how I did that. Any questions, Stella? Because I don't want to be monologuing. Okay, keep going. All right, so I'm using a tool here called Lindy's Awesome. It's a way to wire up different tools and then to insert an AI step kind of along your chain of automation. So what I'm doing here in Lindy is on a recurring schedule. So I said every day at 8 a.m., do this thing, every weekday at 8 a.m. So I'm telling it to check my calendar, right? So this is how I do this with an app called Lindy. So Lindy is a great automation tool that allows you to insert AI steps into your chain of automations. So what I have here is I have set on a recurring schedule. This is just a timer. Every weekday, 8 a.m. Eastern, I'm telling Lindy to look at a calendar. So you can see here I've connected my Google Calendar with my Brian at Hoop account. And this is, you can select different LLMs depending on what your needs are. and then I have a calendar ID. I actually don't have a query here. I'm letting the AI automatically figure out what I want. And so basically at this step, I'm just saying, hey, look at the calendar. The next step is an AI prompt. So you can see the prompt here, and maybe we can post this with the notes. But it basically says, AI, you're the manager of the customer support team. Take a look at the team calendar. And then I sort of explain to the prompt what I said before. The first person in the calendar entry is the primary support person, and the second person is the engineering escalation. So basically I'm explaining that workflow in plain text to the prompt, and I'm telling the AI agent to review the calendar and then to go to Slack with the output of that prompt and basically just say, hey, these are the people that are on primary and secondary. So it's pretty straightforward. You don't have to set specific fields or anything like that. You're basically just telling the agent, look at the calendar, figure it out, and then once you've figured it out, send a Slack message.
And when you were writing this prompt, did it take multiple iterations to get all of the details?
It sure did. It definitely did. So weirdly, the thing that I struggled with was getting the agent to mention the specific people on support. So I tried a bunch of different things to make that work. And ultimately I said, please mention the relevant team members. And then I said, here are their handles in Slack. And then I also included the Slack member ID. You can look up how to get that for your individual users. But I basically gave it this kind of directory to use. And once it had this information, the mentions were able to function.
And how did you know to do that?
Just trial and error.
Well, so that's, I think, a healthy thing that comes up a bunch is like, you're just not going to get it right the first time probably. So figuring it out is part of the process.
Totally. And I think the nice thing about AI is that you can use AI to help you debug the AI. You can have ChatGPT or whatever your LLM of choice is and say, hey, I'm trying to set up this automation. It's not working. This is what I'm seeing. This is the error message. Or in my case, it's just not going. And then you just sort of have to debug it, but at least you have a partner in crime. Okay, so here's how it looks in Slack. So you can see here at 8:03 a.m., which is interesting because if you recall, I had set it for 8 a.m. So maybe it took a few minutes to go and figure things out and craft the message. But in any event, every morning we get this, good morning, here's your support rotation update. And it's saying today support coverage in primary, secondary, and then it's giving us tomorrow. It's doing the mentions, which we worked hard to get. And then, you get your little AI flourish at the end. Have a great day with a star. I'm not sure where that came from, but I like it. And, this is great because it allows less technical members of staff to do something that ordinarily would require, a couple of steps and maybe some API calls and things like that. And you're just able to accomplish it with AI through essentially some natural language prompting and some good old-fashioned troubleshooting skills.
Awesome. Your Slack is giving me anxiety with so many unread channels. So let's move on to the next workflow.
All right, so the next one is a quick one, and it's a fun one, and maybe it isn't operationally necessary.
Oh, it is.
It's like a thing. So every week I do a presentation internally called Hoopy Numbers, which is a weekly walkthrough of some of the metrics that we care about at Hoop. And whenever I make my slides, I always put an image up front. And in the olden times, 6 months ago, I would go to something like Unsplash and find a stock image that, for whatever reason felt thematically or seasonally or weather appropriate. And I would put that in the front, and that would be that. But now that we have generative AI, I use ChatGPT to create an image, and I have this long running thread with ChatGPT where every Thursday morning or Wednesday night I say, hey, it's Hoopy Numbers time, let's do an image. So I'm going to show you some of those images and what I've been using for a prompt. So here's the thread in ChatGPT. Sometimes I give it a lot of instructions and I go through a couple of iterations, and sometimes I do very little. So I'll show you quickly a couple of those. So this was the most recent Hoopy Numbers. I told it to do a hopeful image in the style of the Gone with the Wind movie poster. And I said, instead of a woman as it is in the poster, bring back our friendly cyborg. And then I wrote he even though I don't know if I meant he, but I wrote he because its typos apparently don't matter. Painting the vista and the words hoopy numbers appear. Side note, ChatGPT just launched an update to make text a lot better at showing up in images. I have struggled mightily at times to get the words hoopy numbers to show up in images. So hopefully that is an issue that is not going to be an issue as much going forward. But anyways, you can see this is this week's image. Last week, because I've done so many of these, I just told it to be creative and to make an awesome image however you want in whatever style you want. The only requirement is that it says hoopy numbers. So you can see this is what it came up with, and it was great. I used it, no problem. On the other hand...
That was a good one. That was a good one. The whale.
The whale took a number of iterations because the whale was looking a little weird for me. At some point, I think the model was thinking that when I said hoopy numbers, I meant numbers that were hoopy. And I don't even know why I got letters and like the 3 dashes. 43 for any Douglas Adams fans out there. You know, sometimes you would get this sort of thing. It was a submarine at one point. So, you know, hoopy numbers. And then the last one I'll show, if I just go back, because I remember around Valentine's Day, we did like a 2-part series, which was kind of fun. So we did a hoopy numbers robot. And then the week after Valentine's Day, we did like the hungover robot version. So that was nice to be able to do variations on the theme. So spice up your presentations with ChatGPT and use it for cover images and other images, especially now that the text has been improved. I think you could actually use this. And it is. And I feel like building these long threads and long conversations around something like this is great because it's just giving more and more context to the model.
Yes. And I was just going to say that was an interesting thing. You can see that it's a historical thread, so you can just build on that. That's great.
Yeah. And then you get to the point where you can just say, hey, you know, just be creative. Give me something. Or like, hey, remember that robot we did in February? Give me something with that robot.
I know it might seem silly, but like it's become a bit of a team ritual for us where everyone like, at least I look forward to seeing what the image is for our hoopy numbers presentation every week. It just adds a little bit of delight. So I love it.
And think about how you would do that in the old days. Like if you wanted to, you would have to draw or do something.
Yeah. All right, let's do the third one.
All right, last one. So Hoopy SQL. So this is a good one. I have been in finance in a startup context for, you know, the better part of more than a decade at this point. So I have some rudimentary SQL knowledge, but I am by no means like a data scientist or anything like that. So my SQL is rudimentary at best. But one of the great things about ChatGPT, of course, is that you can use it to help you write queries. And similar to image generation, the longer your conversation with ChatGPT in a single thread about something like a discrete set of tables that you're querying with SQL, the more knowledge it will accumulate. And then it makes it a lot easier to say, hey, do you remember that new user onboarding view? Write me a query, but for this other user. And then all you have to do is provide an email address, and then the Hoopy SQL editor will just give you useful, usable SQL. And in addition to getting great results, the other nice thing is that if you have a bug, if you return an error, you can just write back line 9, column 11, error, and then you could write what the error message is, and it will debug the query and give you a revised query. And it works really well. So let me share my screen and I'll walk you through a couple, and maybe, well, let me take it again. What I was going to say is we could maybe edit this out if it turns out that we end up sharing email addresses or whatever sensitive stuff. So we'll just take a look at what the output is. Okay, so here's an example of how I used it. So I have 2 tables. I have a person IDs table and a person ID string. And I'm trying to use those different properties to figure out a group of people and some data in Hoop for that. So here's a conversation I'm having within this like mega thread at this point with ChatGPT. I actually just recently switched to O3 Mini High, which is the coding and logic focused model. So I'm asking it some questions. It's returning different queries that I can run in order to check different data to see if I can get what I need. And so I'm running that, and it said, this is my prompt. And you can see how short my prompt is. I'm just saying, okay, step 2 returned IDs and distinct IDs, but it didn't give me any email addresses. So then it's giving me a series of steps to take, a number of queries that I can use. And then it sort of says, okay, next, it summarizes what the next steps are. And then, I'm having some issues and I can't find what I'm looking for. And then eventually I do start to get results. And it's just me going back and forth with ChatGPT. There was an issue with the query stalling, and then it gave me a performance optimized version of the query. And then later on down the road, I wanted a different event, so I just asked for it. And then here's an example of what I was saying where I got an error, and I just told ChatGPT there was an error in line 25, column 35 of the query, and it adjusted the query, gave me something new, and then that worked. So you can see it's very iterative back and forth. Like I said, I have rudimentary SQL knowledge, but the fact that I have this really adept partner to help me write queries is fantastic. And then to the extent I ever need to look up similar information for a different user or something like that, it's got all of that context about what we've done in the past. And I can just say, hey, tell me how many tasks Hoop captured for Stella that were from email. And it can understand the context of that, give me a query that I can use. I mean, there are obviously pitfalls because data is complex and there's, little things you need to know. But for many use cases, using Hoop like this gives me a whole new capability and allows me to using ChatGPT, and it gives me a whole new capability that I just didn't really have in the same way. Like I could probably muddle through, but this allows me to do something that would take me a couple of hours and figure it out in like 20 minutes.
And in this case, it's like ChatGPT is your thought partner, is your sort of instructor, your, someone that you're, not someone, but something that you're talking to that's like going back and forth and helping you brainstorm and problem solve.
Yeah, and there's no judgment. It's like a no judgment space, right?
Yeah,
you can make mistakes. You can ask stupid questions. You can ask stupid questions over and over. You can make typos. It doesn't matter. It's just going to help you. It's endlessly patient, and it'll help you get to the answer, which is awesome.
Which is all that you really want.